The Boeing 777 shuddered through turbulence over the North Atlantic, its business-class cabin dimmed to simulate night, while passengers dozed behind silk eye masks. In Seat 3A, Katara Voss nursed her third espresso, diamond-studded Patek Philippe catching the reading light as she reviewed quarterly reports for her aerospace empire. At 38, she commanded a fortune built on military contracts and civilian aviation technology, her company's satellites orbiting overhead while she flew in luxury toward a merger worth 9 figures. The cabin intercom crackled to life with unusual urgency. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Morrison speaking." His voice carried an edge that made Katara lower her tablet. "We have an unusual situation. I need to speak privately with anyone aboard who has military aviation experience, particularly combat hours. Please press your call button if this applies to you." Silence stretched through the darkened cabin. Katara's finger hovered over the call button, her mind racing through calculations that had nothing to do with stock portfolios. 12 years since she'd last worn a flight suit. 12 years since the desert had tried to claim her life and taken everything else that mattered. The intercom crackled again. "To clarify, I need someone with actual stick time in military aircraft. Combat experience preferred." Captain Morrison's voice held barely contained tension. "This is not a drill or publicity stunt. We have a genuine emergency situation developing." Through her window, Katara noticed something that made her blood run cold. 3 dark shapes paced the airliner in perfect formation, their angular profiles unmistakably military. No navigation lights, no identification markings visible in the moonlight. They maintained precise distance and speed, ghosting through the night like predators sizing up prey. Her tablet slipped from her lap as muscle memory flooded back. The weight of a helmet, the vibration of twin engines, the electric taste of fear mixed with adrenaline. The other passengers remained oblivious, lost in their champagne dreams and stock options, but Katara recognized the dance unfolding outside her window. She performed it herself over the sands of 3 different continents. The aircraft shuddered again, but this time it wasn't turbulence. The unknown escorts had closed formation, herding them toward coordinates that definitely weren't London Heathrow. Katara's finger stabbed the call button with practiced precision, her businessman's manicure catching the overhead light one last time before everything changed. Within minutes, a flight attendant appeared beside her seat, professional smile failing to mask obvious fear. "Ma'am, the captain would like to speak with you immediately. Please follow me to the cockpit." The woman's voice trembled slightly. "And ma'am, he asked me to tell you that our escorts are requesting identification of all military personnel aboard." Captain Morrison stood waiting in the galley, his weathered face grave in the harsh fluorescent lighting. Behind him, the cockpit door hung open, revealing instrument panels alive with warning lights and the co-pilot speaking in urgent, clipped phrases into his headset. Morrison's eyes locked onto Katara's with the intensity of a man drowning and spotting a life preserver. "Thank you for coming forward," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Captain Jim Morrison, 26 years commercial, former Navy. Those fighters out there just informed us we're being diverted to a classified military installation. They want to speak with any combat veterans aboard." His grip was firm, calloused from years of flying. "I'm hoping you can help me understand what we're walking into." Katara studied the man's face, reading stress markers she'd learned to recognize in squadron briefings when missions went sideways. His jaw muscles twitched with suppressed anxiety, and she noticed the slight tremor in his hands, not fear, but the hyper-awareness that came with genuine threat assessment. "Major Katara Voss, retired," she replied, her voice automatically shifting to the crisp cadence of military communication. "Call sign Razorwire. Thunderbolt, 3 deployments, 412 combat hours over Iraq and Afghanistan." The words felt strange on her tongue after years of boardroom negotiations and profit margins. Morrison's expression shifted immediately from desperate hope to professional respect. A-10 pilot. He nodded slowly, as if pieces of a puzzle were falling into place. Close air support, tank killer. His voice dropped to a whisper. Major, those escorts aren't showing on any civilian radar, and they knew exactly where to find us. This isn't random. Through the cockpit windows, Katara could see the lead fighter more clearly now, sleek, angular lines that suggested stealth technology, flying in formation with surgical precision. The pilot's helmeted silhouette was barely visible in the moonlight, but she recognized the body language of someone completely in control of their aircraft. Professional military aviators. "They're herding us somewhere specific," she observed, studying the flight pattern. "Classic intercept and escort protocol. Question is whether we're cargo or prisoners." Her business attire suddenly felt like a costume, artificial silk and Italian leather replacing the Kevlar and Nomex that had once been her second skin. The intercom crackled with the co-pilot's voice. "Captain, they're requesting to speak directly with the combat veteran. Radio frequency 243, encrypted military emergency channel." Static filled the pause. "Sir, they know exactly who's aboard." Morrison handed Katara a headset, his expression grim. "Major, it appears this conversation is specifically for you." He gestured toward the co-pilot's seat. "Whatever this is about, they tracked us down 37,000 feet over the Atlantic Ocean just to talk to you." Katara slipped on the headset, muscle memory guiding her fingers to the familiar controls of aircraft communication systems. The encrypted channel hummed with the particular quality of military-grade radio equipment, a sound that triggered memories she'd spent 12 years suppressing. Sand storms and rocket fire, wingman chatter and ground control vectors, the metallic taste of fear, and the electric surge of combat adrenaline. "Unknown aircraft calling civilian flight UA-447, she transmitted, her voice steady despite the circumstances. "This is Major Katara Voss, call sign Razorwire. Identify yourself and state your intentions." The response came immediately, delivered in the emotionless tone of professional military communications. "Razorwire, this is Phantom Lead, call sign Nightshade. We have operational priority authorization to divert your flight for immediate debriefing. You are requested to accompany us to Delta 77 facility for classified consultation." Katara's blood ran cold. Delta 77 was a designation she recognized from her clearance days, a black site facility that officially didn't exist, used for operations that left no paper trail. The kind of place where questions got answered and people occasionally disappeared. "Nightshade, requesting clarification of authority and operational parameters," she replied, stalling for time while her mind raced through possibilities. "This is a civilian aircraft with non-combatant passengers. State your authorization code and operational commander." Static filled the channel for several seconds before the response. "Razorwire, authorization code Crimson Phoenix, operational commander classified. You are familiar with this designation." The headset slipped from her fingers, clattering against the instrument panel as the words hit her like a physical blow. Crimson Phoenix, a code name she'd heard exactly once, 12 years ago, in a briefing room that smelled of stale coffee and classified desperation. The operation that had ended her military career and killed the only man she'd ever loved. Morrison caught the headset, studying her face with growing concern. "Major, what is it? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Not a ghost," Katara whispered, her voice barely audible over the drone of aircraft engines. "Something much worse. They're calling in a dead I thought was buried in the sand." She straightened, military bearing asserting itself despite the business suit and civilian surroundings. Whatever Crimson Phoenix represented, whatever they wanted with her after 12 years of silence, she wouldn't face it cowering in the cockpit of a commercial airliner. The fighters outside maintained their formation with mechanical precision, patient as vultures circling carrion. "Captain Morrison," she said, her voice regaining its command authority, "I need you to understand something. Whatever happens next, your passenger's safety depends on following their instructions exactly. No heroics, no deviation from their flight plan. These people don't bluff and they don't negotiate. Captain Morrison watched the transformation with fascination and growing unease. The wealthy businesswoman who'd boarded his aircraft in New York had vanished, replaced by something harder, more dangerous. This woman's eyes held the particular emptiness that came from witnessing things that couldn't be unseen, making decisions that couldn't be unmade. "Major, what exactly are we flying into?" he asked quietly, his voice carrying the weight of responsibility for 297 civilian souls. Katara picked up the headset again, her fingers moving over the controls with practiced efficiency. The encrypted channel crackled to life as she keyed the transmitter, muscle memory guiding her through procedures she'd hoped never to use again. "Nightshade, this is Razorwire," she transmitted, her voice carrying the clipped precision of military communications. "Acknowledge your operational authority. Request confirmation of passenger safety protocols and destination parameters." Razorwire, all civilian passengers will be processed and released upon completion of debriefing. Destination remains classified until arrival. Estimated flight time to facility, 47 minutes. She clicked off the radio and turned to Morrison, seeing her own grim expression reflected in his worried eyes. Through the cockpit windows, the lead fighter maintained its position like a mechanical angel of death, herding them toward whatever Crimson Phoenix represented. 47 minutes to find out why they tracked down one retired A-10 pilot in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, she said, checking her watch with the automatic precision of someone accustomed to countdown timers and tactical clocks. "Captain, I recommend you brief your crew on emergency protocols and tell the passengers we're experiencing a minor route adjustment due to air traffic control requirements." The lie came easily, polished by years of corporate negotiations and classified briefings. But as she watched the mysterious fighters maintaining their perfect formation, Katara knew that whatever waited at the end of this flight would be anything but minor. The intercom system activated throughout the aircraft as Captain Morrison addressed his passengers with the kind of calm professionalism that kept people from panicking at 37,000 feet. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Due to air traffic control requirements, we'll be making a brief unscheduled stop before continuing to London. We apologize for any inconvenience and expect minimal delay." In the business class cabin, passengers grumbled about missed connections and delayed meetings, their biggest concerns focused on stock markets and conference calls. None of them noticed the three dark shapes maintaining formation outside their windows, or understood that their fellow passenger had just been conscripted back into a war she'd thought was over. Katara returned to her seat to retrieve her laptop and briefcase, her movements automatic while her mind processed tactical considerations. The other passengers barely glanced up from their tablets and champagne flutes, still insulated by luxury and ignorance from the reality unfolding around them. She envied their obliviousness, even as she prepared for whatever Crimson Phoenix demanded. Her reflection in the cabin window showed a woman caught between two worlds, designer business attire over the posture and alertness of a combat veteran. The diamonds on her watch caught the reading light, but her eyes held the hollow focus of someone calculating threat vectors and escape routes. 12 years of boardrooms and merger negotiations had softened the edges, but hadn't erased the foundation underneath. The encrypted radio crackled again in her earpiece, Nightshade's voice cutting through her thoughts. "Razorwire, maintain current heading. Approach frequency will be provided in 30 minutes. Be advised, operational security protocols remain in effect." She acknowledged the transmission and settled back into her seat, watching the mysterious escorts through her window. Their formation flying was flawless, the kind of precision that came from extensive training and combat experience. Professional military aviators who knew exactly what they were doing and why they were doing it. The businessman across the aisle complained loudly about the flight delay affecting his London presentation, his voice carrying the entitled indignation of someone who'd never had his plans disrupted by anything more serious than weather. Katara listened to his grievances with detached amusement, remembering when her biggest concerns had involved quarterly earnings and market fluctuations instead of encrypted radio calls and classified facilities. Her smartphone buzzed with text messages from her assistant about the delayed merger meeting, investment bankers wondering about her estimated arrival time, board members requesting updates on the London negotiations. The civilian world she'd built continued spinning, oblivious to the fact that its architect was currently being escorted to a facility that didn't officially exist by fighters whose very presence suggested national security implications. She turned off the phone and tucked it away, knowing that whatever happened next would either end with her resuming normal life in a few hours or disappearing entirely into the classified world she'd left behind. The escorts maintained their formation with mechanical precision, patient as death itself. Through the cockpit radio, she could hear Morrison coordinating with air traffic control, his voice carefully neutral as he reported their minor route adjustment to facilities that had no idea what was really happening. The co-pilot monitored the mysterious fighters on radar, his nervous energy palpable even from the passenger cabin. Katara checked her watch again, 34 minutes until they reached whatever Delta 77 represented. 34 minutes to prepare for a conversation she'd spent 12 years avoiding. The champagne service continued around her, passengers settling back into their luxury cocoons, while she calculated the tactical implications of encrypted radio calls and phantom fighters. The lead escort suddenly banked left, beginning a gradual descent that pulled the commercial aircraft into formation with it. Through her window, Katara could see lights appearing on the horizon, not the scattered glow of civilian airports, but the precise geometric patterns of a military installation. Runway lighting systems, taxiway markers, and the distinctive blue glow of approach radar installations. Delta 77 materialized out of the darkness like something from a fever dream, its existence confirmed only by the navigation lights guiding them toward landing. Whatever Crimson Phoenix wanted, whatever debt they intended to collect, the answers waited somewhere in that maze of classified buildings and secured hangars. The Boeing 777 touched down on the military runway with barely a tremor, Captain Morrison's expertise evident in the smooth transition from flight to ground operations. Through the cabin windows, passengers could see military vehicles positioning themselves around the aircraft, not threatening, but unmistakably official. Security personnel in unmarked uniforms established a perimeter while ground crews prepared mobile boarding stairs. Katara gathered her belongings with mechanical precision, muscle memory guiding her through procedures she'd hoped never to repeat. The other passengers watched the military activity with curious concern, their complaints about scheduled delays forgotten in the face of obvious government involvement. Someone near the front of the cabin asked about customs procedures, their voice carrying nervous uncertainty. The cabin intercom activated with Morrison's carefully controlled announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've been asked to temporarily deplane while officials conduct a brief administrative review. Please remain calm and follow crew instructions. We expect to be airborne again within 2 hours." 2 hours. Katara almost smiled at the optimism. In her experience, classified debriefings rarely ran on commercial aviation schedules. The mysterious escorts had already disappeared into the darkness, their mission complete. Whatever happened next would occur in briefing rooms and secure facilities, away from civilian oversight or public scrutiny. A uniformed officer appeared at the forward cabin door, his bearing unmistakably military despite the lack of visible rank insignia. He spoke quietly with the senior flight attendant before making his way toward business class, his eyes scanning passenger faces with professional efficiency until they locked onto Katara's position. Major Voss. His voice carried command authority wrapped in polite inquiry. I'm Colonel Peterson, Base Security. If you'd please come with me, there are some people who'd like to speak with you. She stood smoothly, her business attire incongruous against the military precision of the moment. The other passengers watched with mixture of curiosity and concern as she followed Colonel Peterson toward the exit, her heels clicking against the aircraft flooring in rhythm with his combat boots. The night air hit her face like a physical reminder of reality beyond pressurized cabins and filtered air systems. The military installation stretched around them, its buildings dark against the star-filled sky. Security lighting cast harsh shadows across empty taxiways, while the distant sound of jet engines suggested other aircraft operations beyond civilian oversight. Colonel Peterson gestured toward a waiting vehicle, his movements economical and professional. The briefing facility is about 10 minutes away. Someone there will explain the situation in detail. He paused, studying her face in the harsh security lighting. Major, I understand you've been out of the service for some time. This won't be a typical recall situation. Katara settled into the passenger seat, watching the installation pass by through bulletproof windows. Hangar facilities and administrative buildings gave way to more secure structures, their architecture suggesting purposes that couldn't be discussed in public. The vehicle's radio crackled with encrypted communications, fragments of operational language that triggered memories she'd spent years suppressing. Colonel, she said quietly, her voice carrying the measured tone of someone accustomed to difficult conversations. Crimson Phoenix ended 12 years ago. Everyone involved is either dead or retired. So why am I sitting in a classified facility listening to ghosts? Peterson's reflection in the window showed a man choosing his words carefully. Major, sometimes the dead don't stay buried, and sometimes retired operators get recalled because they're the only ones who understand what they're dealing with. The briefing facility appeared ahead of them, a nondescript building that could have housed anything from maintenance operations to strategic planning. Security personnel flanked the entrance while electronic countermeasures equipment created invisible barriers against surveillance. Whatever Crimson Phoenix represented, whatever they wanted from her, the answers waited behind those reinforced doors. As the vehicle stopped, Katara caught her reflection in the side mirror, a successful businesswoman transformed back into something harder, more dangerous. The transformation wasn't complete yet, but she could feel the familiar weight of operational responsibility settling across her shoulders like body armor she'd never quite learned to remove. Colonel Peterson opened her door, his expression professionally neutral. Major, welcome back to the war. The briefing room was exactly what Katara expected: sterile fluorescent lighting, acoustic tiles designed to prevent electronic eavesdropping, and the particular smell of industrial coffee mixed with classified desperation. A conference table dominated the center space, surrounded by chairs that had witnessed countless operational planning sessions and damage assessments. 3 people waited for her arrival, their postures and bearing immediately identifiable as career military officers despite civilian clothing. The woman at the head of the table wore the kind of understated authority that came from years of commanding respect in environments where gender still created obstacles. Her gray hair was pulled back in a precise bun, and her eyes held the hollow focus of someone who'd made decisions that cost lives and saved nations. Major Voss, she said, rising from her chair with fluid precision. I'm Director Sarah Chen, Defense Intelligence Agency. Thank you for responding to our invitation. Her handshake was firm, calloused from weapons training that clearly hadn't ended with her transition to intelligence work. I apologize for the dramatic circumstances, but operational security demanded discretion. The 2 men flanking her table maintained professional silence while Chen gestured toward a seat directly across from her position. The arrangement was carefully planned. Interview configuration disguised as collegial meeting, psychological pressure applied through environmental control rather than direct confrontation. Katara remained standing, her business attire suddenly feeling like costume armor against military precision. "Director Chen, let's skip the pleasantries. You diverted a commercial flight over international airspace to drag one retired pilot to a facility that doesn't exist. Either I'm under arrest or you need something. Which is it?" Chen's smile carried genuine appreciation for directness. "Neither, actually. You're here because 12 years ago, you participated in an operation that we thought was successfully concluded. Recent intelligence suggests we were wrong about that conclusion." She opened a manila folder, revealing photographs that made Katara's blood run cold. The first image showed a familiar desert compound, its angular architecture unchanged by time or weather. The second displayed satellite imagery of recent activity, vehicle movements, personnel concentrations, and the distinctive heat signatures of electronic equipment. The third photograph made her sink into the offered chair despite herself. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Webb stared back at her from a reconnaissance photograph, his face gaunt but unmistakably alive. The man she'd watched die in a missile strike 12 years earlier stood beside modern military vehicles, wearing unmarked fatigues and the hollow expression of someone who'd survived things that should have killed him. "That's impossible," she whispered, her voice barely audible in the sterile briefing room. "I saw the explosion. I called in the strike myself. Marcus Webb died in Grid Square 47 Alpha on March 15, 2013. Director Chen leaned forward, her expression combining sympathy with professional necessity. "Major, what you saw was carefully orchestrated theater. Colonel Webb's death was fabricated to extract him from a situation that had become untenable. The problem is that now he's surfaced again, and he's not working for us anymore." The implications hit Katara like physical blows. Marcus Webb had been her squadron leader, mentor, and eventually something more personal than military protocol allowed. His death had ended both Crimson Phoenix and her military career, the guilt and grief driving her into civilian life, and the emotional numbness of corporate success. "He's defected," she said, the words tasting like poison in her mouth. "The man I loved, the officer I trusted with my life, faked his death and went over to the other side." Her hands trembled slightly as she studied the photograph, looking for signs of coercion or duress but finding only the confident posture of someone operating by choice. "It's worse than simple defection," Chen replied, sliding additional photographs across the table. "Colonel Webb has been sharing operational intelligence with hostile forces for the past 18 months. 3 of our assets have been compromised, and 6 operations have been blown. People are dying because of information only he possessed." The briefing room suddenly felt too small, its acoustic tiles and security measures insufficient to contain the scope of betrayal spreading across the conference table. Katara studied each photograph with growing horror, recognizing locations and personnel from her own service record. Marcus hadn't just betrayed his country, he'd weaponized their shared history. "What do you want from me?" she asked, though she already suspected the answer. "I've been out of the service for 12 years. I run an aerospace company. I negotiate contracts and attend board meetings. I'm not qualified for whatever this is." Director Chen's expression hardened with the particular resolve that came from making decisions that would haunt her forever. "Major, you're the only person alive who knows Colonel Webb well enough to predict his operational patterns. You've seen his tactical thinking under pressure. You understand his psychological profile, and you have access to classified information about Crimson Phoenix that we can't risk exposing to current personnel." The room fell silent except for the whisper of filtered air systems and the distant sound of aircraft operations. Katara stared at Marcus's photograph, seeing not the man she'd loved but the threat he'd become. Professional betrayal compounded with personal devastation, creating a complexity that couldn't be resolved through corporate negotiation or financial maneuvering. "You're asking me to hunt him," she said finally, her voice carrying the flat certainty of someone who just recognized the inevitable. "You want me to use everything I know about him to track him down and neutralize him." She looked up from the photographs, meeting Chen's eyes directly. "You're asking me to kill the man I once loved." "We're asking you to serve your country one more time," Chen replied, her tone carefully neutral. "Colonel Webb has become a clear and present danger to national security. His knowledge of classified operations and personnel makes him one of the most dangerous defectors we've ever tracked." She paused, allowing the weight of responsibility to settle. "Major, you're not just qualified for this mission. You're the only person who can complete it successfully." Katara closed the folder, sealing away the photographs that had shattered 12 years of carefully constructed civilian life. Outside the briefing facility, her fellow passengers were probably still complaining about scheduled delays, their biggest concerns focused on missed meetings and inconvenient connections. None of them would understand the weight of being recalled to a war that had never really ended. "If I agree to this," she said quietly, "what happens to my company, my board of directors, the merger negotiations in London?" The questions felt absurd even as she asked them, civilian concerns dwarfed by national security implications and personal betrayal. Director Chen's expression softened slightly, acknowledging the sacrifice being requested. "Your absence will be covered through appropriate channels. Corporate obligations can be managed through trusted intermediaries. But Major, I need to be clear about the operational parameters. This isn't a temporary consulting arrangement. Once you're read into current intelligence, you're committed until the mission is complete." The implications were obvious: success or death. With no possibility of returning to the comfortable civilian life she'd built from the ruins of her military career. Katara studied the faces around the conference table, reading the professional resignation of people who'd made similar sacrifices countless times. "Colonel Webb trained me," she said, thinking aloud while her mind processed tactical considerations. "He taught me everything I know about close air support, tactical flying, and operational planning. Using that knowledge against him feels like—" She paused, searching for words that could encompass the emotional complexity. "Like using someone's love letters to destroy them." "Major," Chen said gently, "sometimes the people we trust most are the ones capable of causing the greatest damage. Colonel Webb's betrayal is personal for all of us, but the mission transcends personal feelings. Too many lives are at stake for sentiment." Through the briefing room's reinforced windows, Katara could see aircraft moving across the darkened airfield, their navigation lights creating geometric patterns against the star-filled sky. Somewhere out there, Marcus Webb was planning operations that would cost American lives, using knowledge she'd helped him acquire during their shared service. The decision crystallized with the sudden clarity that came from recognizing inevitable consequences. She'd spent 12 years building a civilian identity from the wreckage of military trauma, but some wounds never healed completely. Some debts could only be paid in the currency that created them. "Director Chen," she said, her voice carrying the crisp authority of someone accepting command responsibility, "I'll need complete operational autonomy, unlimited resources, and absolute clearance for all Crimson Phoenix materials." She straightened in her chair, feeling the familiar weight of mission planning settling across her shoulders. "And I'll need my old call sign reactivated. Razorwire is going back to war." The transformation was immediate and unmistakable. The successful businesswoman who'd boarded a commercial flight in New York vanished, replaced by something harder, more dangerous. Chen nodded with satisfaction, recognizing the emergence of the combat veteran they desperately needed. "Welcome back, Major Razorwire," she said, sliding a thick classified folder across the table. "Your mission briefing begins now." The folder contained everything they knew about Marcus Webb's current operations, a catalog of betrayal that grew more damning with each page. Classified documents, operational photographs, and intelligence reports painted a picture of systematic treachery extending far beyond simple defection. He'd become a teacher, sharing American tactical doctrine with hostile forces while building networks of compromised assets. Katara absorbed the information with professional detachment, her mind automatically organizing details into tactical patterns and operational possibilities. Marcus's psychological profile remained consistent with her memories: methodical, patient, and absolutely ruthless when circumstances demanded it. The man who taught her to kill efficiently was now using those same skills against his former comrades. His base of operations appears to be the original Crimson Phoenix compound, Director Chen explained, pointing to satellite imagery that showed recent construction and expanded security measures. He's fortified the position significantly, but the basic geography remains unchanged. You know that terrain better than anyone currently in service. The irony was bitter. She would be returning to the place where her military career had ended, where she'd watched the man she loved apparently die in service to his country. Now, she would complete the circle by making his death real, finishing what should have been concluded 12 years earlier. Timeline, she asked, studying the operational parameters with growing intensity. Professional focus pushed emotional considerations into manageable compartments, allowing tactical thinking to dominate personal feelings. How long do I have to plan and execute? 36 hours maximum, Chen replied grimly. Intelligence indicates Webb is planning something significant within the next week. We can't allow him additional time to compromise more operations or personnel. She slid additional documents across the table. Transportation and equipment arrangements are already in motion. You'll be inserted via classified aircraft to minimize signature and maximize operational security. 36 hours to plan a mission against someone who knew her tactical thinking as intimately as she knew his. Marcus would anticipate her approach vectors, her preferred engagement ranges, and her operational philosophy. Success would require evolving beyond the patterns he'd taught her, becoming something new while honoring the foundation he'd provided. I'll need a support team, Katara said, already calculating personnel requirements and logistics considerations. Someone I can trust absolutely, with combat experience and clearance for this level of operation. She looked up from the briefing materials, meeting Chen's eyes directly. And I'll need someone who never served under Colonel Webb. His knowledge of our people could compromise anyone he trained or commanded. Director Chen nodded approvingly, recognizing sound tactical thinking. We have someone in mind. Captain Alexandra Torres, call sign Scorpion, A-10 pilot with extensive combat experience, no previous connection to Crimson Phoenix operations. She's currently stationed at Nellis Air Force Base, flying aggressor training missions. The name was unfamiliar, which was exactly what the situation required. Someone with the skills necessary for the mission, but without the emotional complications that came from shared history with Marcus Webb. Professional competence without personal investment in outcomes that transcended tactical success. Brief her immediately, Katara instructed, falling back into command patterns that felt both natural and strange after 12 years of corporate leadership. I want her read into full operational details within 6 hours, and I want complete technical specifications on current A-10 configurations, weapons systems, electronics, defensive capabilities. If I'm going back to war, I'm going with current equipment. The briefing continued for another 2 hours, each detail adding weight to the mission's complexity and personal cost. Marcus Webb had evolved from the officer she'd known into something more dangerous, his tactical brilliance now serving hostile interests, while his knowledge of American capabilities provided devastating advantages to enemy forces. When the session finally concluded, Katara found herself alone in the briefing room with classified documents and the weight of renewed military responsibility. Through the windows, dawn was beginning to lighten the horizon, painting the airfield in shades of gray and gold that reminded her of countless mission briefings in similar facilities. Her smartphone buzzed with messages from the civilian world, her assistant wondering about her status, board members requesting updates on the London merger, investors concerned about her delayed arrival. She turned off the device and tucked it away, knowing that Katara Voss, the businesswoman, had effectively ceased to exist the moment she'd accepted this mission. Major Razorwire was going back to war, hunting a man who taught her everything she knew about killing and dying in service to causes larger than personal survival. The irony was almost overwhelming, but professional duty provided clarity that corporate success had never achieved. She gathered the classified materials and prepared to begin mission planning that would either conclude Marcus Webb's treachery or cost her everything she'd built in the years since Crimson Phoenix. Either outcome was acceptable, as long as the betrayal ended and American lives stopped paying the price for his defection. The aircraft hangar at Nellis Air Force Base buzzed with pre-dawn activity as ground crews prepared two A-10 Thunderbolt II aircraft for immediate deployment. The distinctive twin-engine attackers sat like mechanical predators under harsh fluorescent lighting, their GAU-8 Avenger cannons and hardpoint stations ready to deliver precisely applied violence to distant targets. Captain Alexandra Torres completed her pre-flight inspection with methodical precision, her movements reflecting hundreds of hours of combat experience over multiple deployments. At 29, she carried herself with the confident competence of someone who'd learned to trust aircraft systems and tactical doctrine above all else. Her call sign, Scorpion, had been earned through a combination of patience and lethality that made her ideal for missions requiring both precision and aggression. Captain Torres. The voice belonged to someone clearly accustomed to command, though the woman approaching wore civilian business attire that seemed incongruous against the military setting. I'm Major Katara Voss, recently recalled to active duty. I understand you've been briefed on our mission parameters. Torres snapped to attention, recognizing authority despite the unconventional presentation. Yes, ma'am. Classified counterintelligence operation, high-value target elimination, extreme operational security. I've been cleared for full mission details. She studied the older woman's face, noting stress markers that suggested personal investment beyond professional duty. At ease, Captain, Katara replied, falling into the easy command rhythm that had served her well during her original military service. Call sign Razorwire. This is my first time back in a cockpit since retiring 12 years ago, so I'll be relying heavily on your expertise with current systems and procedures. The admission came without ego, professional honesty overriding personal pride. Torres relaxed slightly, appreciating the direct approach and obvious competence. Ma'am, these birds are updated versions of what you flew during your service. Enhanced electronics, improved defensive systems, but the basic platform remains essentially unchanged. The GAU-8 still fires depleted uranium rounds at 4,200 rounds per minute, and the aircraft still flies like a brick with wings. A brief smile crossed Katara's face at the familiar description. A-10 pilots had been making that joke for decades, acknowledging their aircraft's limitations while celebrating its incredible resilience and firepower. The Thunderbolt II wasn't graceful or fast, but it was tough enough to return home with massive battle damage and powerful enough to destroy any ground target within range. Weapons load, she asked, studying the hardpoint configurations with professional interest. The aircraft carried a devastating array of precision munitions, from Hellfire missiles to GPS-guided bombs, each weapon system designed for specific tactical situations. I assume we're configured for hard target destruction rather than close air support. AGM-114 Hellfires, GBU-12 laser-guided bombs, and full ammunition load for the cannon, Torres replied, consulting her mission checklist. Intelligence indicates the target facility is heavily fortified with integrated air defense systems. We'll need precision strikes to minimize collateral damage while ensuring complete target destruction. The target facility. Katara forced herself to think in operational terms rather than personal ones, but the clinical language couldn't completely mask the emotional reality. They were preparing to destroy the compound where she'd served alongside Marcus Webb, where they'd planned missions and shared classified intelligence, where her military career had effectively ended with his apparent death. Flight plan, she continued, pushing personal considerations into manageable compartments while focusing on tactical necessities. Professional duty provided structure for emotions that threatened to compromise mission effectiveness. Tours led her to a wall-mounted chart showing their route through international airspace, carefully planned to avoid civilian radar coverage and hostile surface-to-air missile systems. Low-level ingress through mountain terrain, using natural features to mask our approach signature. Electronic countermeasures.